Welcome to The Whole Pineapple. I'm Ruby Boris.
And I'm Ann Judge. The Whole Pineapple is a podcast about wellness focused around fertility. We'll talk with experts on a wide range of topics, including nutrition, stress relief, sleep, mental health, etc.
And we'll dig into the issues that can cause fertility challenges, like PCOS, or early menopause, or cancer treatment.
So if you're curious about your fertility, whether you're ready to start a family,
or you're preserving your options for the future, let's dig in. We are inviting Regina Townsend to our show today. Regina is an infertility advocate, the founder of the Broken Brown Egg, and also an award-winning youth librarian. The Broken Brown Egg is an internationally recognized reproductive health organization which exists to inform and advocate for those questioning or experiencing the impact of infertility and reproductive health issues, with an emphasis on the Black experiences of them. She founded the Broken Brown Egg in 2009 as a personal blog to document her journey with infertility, and through feedback from her followers, identified a need for inclusion for other Black women experiencing similar journeys. And now the Broken Brown Egg is a 501c3 tax-exempt organization with the goal of providing resources, education, and support for three major targets: reproductive justice, health equity, the reproductive careers pipeline, and empowerment and community. And as we have discussed prior in snack number 8, Regina is also the author of Make If Makes Sense, Putting the Words to the Fields of Infertility, which we reviewed in our very, very first book club snack.
We loved it.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yes. And she's been interviewed on multiple podcasts and conveniently has a playlist on her website of all the episodes she's been in. So just pull up the Spotify, or not. This is not an ad. But we were lucky enough to talk to this superhuman herself. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome and virtually hand the mic over to Regina Townsend. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. You guys, that made me sound really good. It makes me sound like somebody who is not sitting here in fuzzy socks.
I wish I was in fuzzy socks.
But I am indeed a person sitting here in fuzzy socks. And we were just talking about overcommitting and doing way too many things. But this part, these are labors of love. So I enjoy doing this part. I enjoy doing all the things that I do. But yeah. But this has been what I call my preferred soapbox for a while now. So, 13 years.
Yeah.
So.
I know when you said the 2009, that's when my daughter was born. So I'm like, oh my gosh, so much has happened since 2009. And this is, one of your mini babies. And this one is a teenager now. So
yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned fuzzy socks, because one of the things I really love about your book is it's so down to earth, and it's like talking to a close friend or a sister. When I was done reading, I'm like, oh yeah, so we're best friends now. She's just...
Thank you. Good company.
Well, I guess we'd like to start by, not to be like spoiler for people that already listened to our book, but not everybody's going to have heard that episode. So let's just kind of have you tell us your story, if you don't mind, kind of going through what your journey was in fertility, and then especially how you ended up founding the Broken Brown Egg.
I don't mind. I'm kind of an open book, no pun intended, when it comes to...
Oh, I love library puns.
Right? I started the Broken Brown Egg really because, like I said in my bio, when I was looking to just find out what was going on with me, I was having these horrible periods that were lasting weeks on end. And then when I would call, it would be like, oh, if you're not bleeding through a pad in an hour, it's fine. And then when I would just be like, okay, but I can't, I have no more energy. And I would be like, well, I could go back to the doctor who didn't listen, or I could go to the emergency room. So then I would be sitting in the emergency room for hours. There would be times where I would have to be there at 8 when they opened and might not get seen until 4:30. It was crazy. It was like people have worked full work shifts, and I've been sitting here waiting for somebody to tell me why I'm bleeding. And it even got to the point where one time I went to the emergency room, and when they did the triage and they ask you to write what you're there for, I put menorrhagia, and they were like, ooh, how do you know that term? And I was like, well, when you've been doing this as long as I have, and you look at your medical records, you start to learn things. I feel silly about it, but I didn't connect these really ridiculous periods to fertility issues. I just didn't connect them. I was a part of a website called Chocolate Brides. It was a message board, and it was started for a very similar reason, Keisha Monk, who started it, she's a radio personality and voiceover actress. And she started it because when she was getting married and she was looking for resources, every bridal magazine was only white women. Every website was only white women. When she was asking questions that had cultural significance, like there's jumping of the broom that we do, or different kinds of attire that we might want, or how to find the vendors for the fabrics that we might need, she couldn't find anything. And it gave the impression that Black women didn't get married. Black people didn't get married. They just have kids. I was a part of that community, and it was such a strong community of support because it was pre-Facebook that everybody kind of was like, okay, so I'm married, but I'm staying here.
Yeah.
You guys have to kick me out. And people would start these journals of what originally was like their planning journal, where they put their little pictures and what they were planning to do. And then after the wedding, they would come back and put like house hunting journal or pregnancy journal or personal journal.
That's cool.
It was really, I'm still friends with those. It's crazy that now these are people that I've now known for like 19, 20 years. There would be a few that would say, oh, we are thinking about having a baby, but it's not happening. And I was like, oh, wow, I wonder what's going on with them. I just thought individualized, that's an issue with these people. Or if they said anything about IVF, I was like, oh, wow, they must have some money. Because every time I've ever heard about IVF, I was like, that's for rich people. So, oh, okay. It didn't even click to me. And then eventually, when we decided that we were going to start trying, because we were young when we got married, we were 23. Which at the time didn't feel young, but now I'm like, dang, you was young. Yeah, we didn't even put it together like, oh yeah, we're going to do that immediately. We kind of waited. And I thought, well, we're young, it'll be fine. And then also, if you get pregnant, that'll fix the period issue. Like, that's where I was in my knowledge of how my body worked. And when I started to feel frustrated and look for websites or any kind of information, I kept hitting this wall of people who either were older, had more established careers, had the finances, or were just more comfortable talking to their doctors. And I saw nobody that looked like me. And I started to realize that that was part of the issue, was I didn't know the right questions because we hadn't had these conversations and we had just been kind of assuming our own stereotypes. And so all of the Black women that I talked to, when they found out they were dealing with infertility, it was this big culture shock of, but I thought we're super fertile. I thought we were hyper fertile. I thought that we always, and the bigger issue is that we have too many children. And so I just realized, okay, but this is an issue because clearly we've believed our own stereotypes enough that we've made it where now we're more likely to experience infertility, but least likely to seek treatment. We're the ones that are disproportionately affected with the things that can cause infertility, like PCOS, like endometriosis, like fibroids. And yet we don't know what those things are. And so from that, and then being a librarian, it just kind of all came full circle. And I started the blog really to get my own thoughts out. And then people started commenting and were saying like, oh my God, thank you for saying that. And then I got really mad one day and I just put on Facebook like, hey, you know, that aunt that doesn't have any kids and always babysits, maybe don't ask her why she doesn't have kids. Maybe she can't. And then I started getting like flooded inbox of colleagues and coworkers and high school classmates that were like commenting in my inbox that were like, thank you for saying that. I haven't had anybody to talk to about this. I didn't know where to start. Can you tell me how you found your doctor? And I realized that there was like this giant group of people who were so isolated and so frustrated and just felt like, where am I supposed to even talk about this? Because if I say it, then not only am I admitting that my body doesn't work properly, but also culturally, I don't work properly because I've been told that Black women, this is easy for them. So it was this huge relief for me to just kind of start talking because I felt stifled and I didn't want anybody else to feel as frustrated and stifled and as insignificant as I felt sitting in those waiting rooms and trying to get information and listening to people's rude comments.
Hard to even say anything because that's just such a brilliant summary of everything. I mean, that's just like, you know, you're hitting the early age of social media and communication and community and like finding these sources together. And I think as much as we kind of hate on social media right now and division, like you forget that it was a way and can be a way still to bring people together who might be different geographically but are going through experiences, and especially for something like infertility that people just don't talk about enough and people don't realize how common it is. And you're right, there are all these cultural factors at play too, where people might be even less likely to want to share what they've been going through. So I just so admire that you've taken your personal journey and been able to be so open about it. I mean, the amount of people that you have helped is probably so much greater than even you realize.
Yeah, there was such a need. I mean, so not only is infertility itself something that people don't talk about, and so it seems to be kind of like a marginalized area of healthcare that people just don't have support for, but then Black women just didn't have anything at all. So it is so remarkable. This website is just so important, and as fertility providers, we are so fortunate and grateful for having that as a resource for our patients.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing it. I get a lot of comments now from people who are like, "Oh, my doctor told me about your site," or even my own doctor. I went for my annual checkup and she was like, "I've got some people that follow you, but I can't tell them that I'm," and I was like,
"You're her celebrity client. She can't out you."
I know, that's so cool. So I make sure that I go back and I like post and say, like, I am just like you. I am still trying to figure this out. I still have no idea what's going on. I still got to get up and go to work tomorrow and act like this isn't bothering me. And I think that was one of the other things that really resonated with people, kind of like you said, Ruby, like that. I really do talk to everybody kind of like the same way, like, girl, look. I mean, we could be sitting at the DMV and I have the same attitude of, well, we're friends now. So what time you think we're going to get out of here? That helps me to kind of calm my own anxiety, and it disarms the other person from their feeling like they have to be so precise or pristine or any of those things we tell ourselves that stop us from actually getting help or support or really getting to the heart of what's really going on with us. Sometimes when somebody is coming out and they're angry or they're the mean person at work and you immediately feel like, oh, she gets on my nerves. But then when you come at it from this kind of place where you disarm them, you find out they start telling you things and you find out that it's like they're going through a lot or whatever. And it makes it easier to kind of get through life.
Totally. Anne and I, we work in a field that it's very emotional. There's lots of things going on in a lot of our patients. One thing that I use a lot when I'm talking to patients is humor and trying to brighten, because this journey is so dark sometimes and it just feels so long, that if I can just bring a little bit of humor to the situation, it helps.
Does.
And it's so isolated. I think that's one of the other hard parts about how everybody has a smartphone now. In the early days when I worked here, people would talk to each other in the waiting rooms a little bit because you're hanging out, you've seen the same 3 magazines, there's not much else to do. And so there'd be a little bit more of that, like, how are you doing? And I don't see that now. Everyone's just, glued to their own phone. And so I know working here so long, there's so many times that I'll have somebody talking to me about how alone they feel and no one else is in the situation. And you just want to be like, that person you sat next to in the waiting room, like she's on her 3rd IVF cycle too. Like, I wish I could tell you, because I think you two would actually get along really well.
Like play dates. Yeah. Like with your kids, you're like, here, I'm going to put you in touch with this kid's mom. Like it's play date.
Or setting up a husband play date. You're like,
I've set up a few of those.
I'm going to help you make friends.
Yeah.
But you've done such a great job, I think, as you said, disarming people, because you're, open about your experience, that amount of humor, and it lets people release what are, such big emotions that they're dealing with. And I love the whole back section of your book where you got your waiting room games and other little humorous tips, because you have to have that aspect to be able to get through something as hard as this. Otherwise, you just be sad all the time and never want to leave the house and go to treatment.
How would we function? And one of the things that I learned probably later than I could have was I wanted whatever child comes my way, be it by birth or through adoption or whatever, I'd like them to meet the me that I wanted to be. I didn't want them to meet the me that has been drug over the coals and has just been just a remnant of who she was. And there are moments, I think, that Judah does get the me that has been raked over the coals. But there are the times where when I'm feeling really burnt out, I can kind of dip into myself and say, okay, but you really did want to be this mom that had this, or you wanted to do that. And that just kind of snaps me back into, okay, let's sit and read a book. Let's breathe a minute. Because if I don't do that, I'll kind of take it for granted how hard it took for me to get here, just because the journey was so just negative, negative, negative. And it's not to say that I don't still have those feelings or that I didn't have those a lot, but being honest about them helped me. So I try to tell people, like, transparency has been a part of my self-care, because trying to hold it in and act like everything is cool, it's all good, I'm fine, that was not working for me. It was actually really tearing me up. So it's easier when I can just say, you know what, actually, I'm probably going to have a glass of wine, but didn't go to jail today, didn't curse anybody out. That's a win. I think that's a win. That's a good day.
Well, let's go back a little bit to your medical diagnosis and everything. So how did you were having these heavy periods, you're going to the ER, like what did it take for you to finally get a diagnosis? Like what do you think were the key turning points in you finally taking some control over your story and knowing what's going on?
The biggest thing I'll say is probably the blog itself, which I hate to say that because I know so many other people that isn't the outlet for them. So hopefully what I learned will help somebody else. But having the blog and writing about or speaking up about what was going on with me kind of became my advocacy for myself, because it was a reproductive endocrinologist from St. Louis, Dr. Simkis. He saw my blog and he reached out to me because he was going to be in Chicago with his wife. And he was like, we'd love to take you to lunch and just talk about, what it is you're doing. And as we were sitting at lunch, he started asking me like, well, do you know anything about PCOS? Because from what I've read, this is what it sounds like it could be. And these are some indications that you can look for. And so the next time you go to your doctor, ask about that. And I was like, okay, we got something. And when I went to the doctor the next time, it was a new doctor. And I asked her, this was only like my third or fourth time seeing her. And I told her, well, what about PCOS? And she kind of like laughed it off and was like, well, it's not that. Because see, we did this test and you didn't have any cysts. And I think, people get on Google and they just think they know, and it's not that. So we're just going to try to get your weight down and get your thyroid under control. And then we'll see. I'm sure now, in retrospect, great lady. And I'm sure that for somebody else who hadn't been dealing with this as long, that might have been really good advice. But for me, who have been sitting in waiting rooms for years, no. So when I left, I was really dejected because at first I felt dismissed. And then I also was frustrated because I was like, well, here I am finally get an answer from a doctor who's not my doctor. I go to my doctor and she acts like I don't know what I'm talking about. Meanwhile, this advice came from a medical professional and I'm a librarian. Like I try not to like hover that over people. But when I research.
You know how to find some sources. Yeah.
Like I know what I'm talking about. So I was really frustrated because I was like, okay, lady. So now I don't know what I'm talking about. So then now I'm back to this lose weight thing. But the frustration was even more intense because it was like, well, if I do have PCOS, that could be causing me to have trouble losing weight. So you're basically just told me I'm my own problem and it's my own fault and I can't do anything about anything. I had to come back for a follow-up. And when I called, she was booked on the one day that I had. And I was like, is there anybody else I can see? And I felt bad. And this is something I've also tried to tell people, don't feel bad. This is your body. But my first thought was, I don't want to hurt her feelings. And she is really nice, but that didn't give me the answer that I wanted. Is there anybody else I can see? The receptionist, he was joking, but he was like, oh, no, you can't do that. He was like, girl, yeah, everybody, that's fine. They don't care.
We don't care. So if it's not a love connection, I've said it before, if it's not a love connection with your provider, find somebody else. We want you to have the right fit too.
It's about the care, right? And so when I switched, and I went to the other doctor and she was going through the rigmarole. And then at the end, it was kind of like a test. And I was like, so I've been reading about this PCOS. What do you think? And she was like, well, if that's what you think, then let's look into it. It's your body. You've been in your body longer. So let's find out. And in that moment, I could have cried. I don't know if I did cry, but in that moment, it was just like, yes, let's look into it. And she was like, PCOS is a syndrome. And then she educated. She didn't just listen, but then she educated and was like, PCOS is a syndrome. So it may look different on different people. So weight may be an issue, but there are some people who are very thin that have PCOS. then she was going through like what it could be. And she said, I know you don't present with cysts, but let's see if some of these other markers might be there. And I was just like, even if I don't walk out of here pregnant today, at least now there's a name for this. I felt like Dorothy on Golden Girls. I just wanted a name. You get not only frustrated and physically tired, but also a little socially embarrassed of not the infertility part, but it starts to look like you aren't doing anything to fix it. And it's like, okay, so now I've been vocal about infertility, but how long am I going to be talking about this? And it looks like I'm not even trying. I'm trying to lose weight. I was walking to work every day. I was walking 25 minutes to work. Like it was a thing. And I felt like everybody is looking at me like she's just talking. She don't really want no baby. She ain't. And I let that guilt weigh on me. But when she said that, it was just like, yes, thank you. From there, we did look at it as a PCOS diagnosis, and she was able to give me an HSG test. We found out that both my tubes were blocked. And I was like, well, wouldn't you know? All this time.
And that's something we bring up all the time for patients too, that there can be more than one thing going on. So even if someone knows they have PCOS, it doesn't mean we don't want to also check other things. And I've had people who have been working for months, sometimes even like a year, working on ovulation and medications, and then they finally check a semen analysis and find out that the sperm count is incredibly low or absent. And then you're like, oh, I guess all that lifestyle stuff wasn't the only thing you had to talk to me about. So
yeah, if partner is advised to do semen analysis, try your best to encourage them to go into the clinics. I know sometimes it's a struggle.
Nobody had even mentioned Jabari the whole time. When she did the HSG test, I remember one of the best things, and I love her to death. Her name is Dr. Korzempa, and I love Dr. Korzempa. To this day, she is my doctor, and I love her because when she was in that room and she did the HSG test and she saw the dye not move, she tried as hard as she could. And she said that, I'm pushing as hard as I can. Mm-hmm. It's not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. I think they're both blocked. And then she came to the head of the bed and she said, Regina, you did everything you could do other than IVF because I know that's not what you wanted to do, but you have done everything you could do. You lost weight. You did this test. You changed your nutrition. You found a doctor to listen. Now let me give you a referral. I know you don't want to do IVF, but I think it's the best thing to do. In that moment, I felt like a person.
Yeah.
Like, not let me shift you over to this other doctor that's going to fix it, but more of a, I see you and I know what you didn't want to do, but I'm telling you it'll work if you just do this part and I got your back. She even was like, the person I'm referring to, she's a great doctor. She's going to be able to get around this tube issue. It's going to be fine. Let me give you the referral. So even in that, it was I'm putting you in good hands and I know what you are trying to get to and I believe in you. And that meant the world.
And even just coming around to talk to you at the head of the bed. You don't realize how rare that is. People that talk to you while you're still laying down and they're down there at your feet. I mean, it's like you've got to...
It's the little things, right? It's totally little things.
It's the little things of making you a person again. Because so much of this, you're not a person. It's just you, some stirrups, and Wanda. It's all the time. And it's really nice.
Now, I know for Ruby and I working here, I mean, all of this is so common for us. And I talk about this sometimes, like how I felt when I was first told we had to do IVF and how I was like, but I don't want to do that. And now it's so routine for us. But like, what were your initial hesitations? Why was it that you were kind of so hesitant at the beginning to consider it?
I have been afraid of needles for my I was, according to my mother, I was the 4-year-old that the nurse would try to like zhuzh me up and like, hi. And I'd be like, right, but are you going to do a shot? I just need to know what you're doing. Why are you leaving the room? Where are you going? What are you going to get? Have a seat. Let's all stay here.
Sounds like my son.
So that was me. And so the thought of the needles was just a big thing. And then there was the cost. My thought was, I am young in this profession. I am just getting started. I don't even know if I'll be able to afford this. And I started running down all these thoughts and Xing myself out, those negative thoughts of just telling yourself, you probably shouldn't be doing this. If you can't afford that, then how can you afford the kid themselves? And if you can, and I started run all of that down, and it just got to be so overwhelming in my head of How are you going to afford this? How are you going to take off work to do this? How are you going to get there? How are you going to choose a clinic if you don't like this person that she refers you to? What are you going to do? It just, in my head, it felt like insurmountable. I've described it as like when Dorothy gets told, well, yeah, you can go home. Just go kill the Wicked Witch. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. Just go do that.
And you need these 3 other things first to kill the witch. So
Yeah,
you got to go do
it's
stuff.
nothing. Just go kill this complete stranger and come back and I got you. That's how it felt.
Yeah, there'll be flying monkeys and all sorts of weird things.
There could be talking trees. Don't worry about it. Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, it's going to be fine. It just was overwhelming, the thought of it. And I held it together for most of that day. And I remember I left there and I went to, my mom took me to Dots, which was one of my favorite stores. I'm so sad they're gone. But we went and we were just kind of like browsing just to kind of, since I had the rest of the day off. And I was holding it together until the end of the night. And my cousin and my sister were like arguing about something. They're about the same age. And so they're almost like sisters themselves. And they were bickering about something. It might have even been about like dinner. And I remember that I had just hit my wall and I just started crying because it was just like, I don't care about dinner. Like, you don't understand. Today, somebody told me that the only way to get where I'm trying to go, I have to let go of everything that I believed. I have to let go of every idea of doing this the way that I wanted to. That's gone. I can't do that anymore. And I really don't care about anything that you guys are arguing about. And I just kind of broke down in that moment of like, you know, you're dealing with infertility, but when you hear that IVF is the only way, it's like, I got infertility. Oh, okay. So, okay, cool. So $12,000. Cool. Okay. Right. Okay. Don't know how I'm gonna do that, but
yeah, that's chill. Great.
No problem. It was so overwhelming in that moment of just like, all these little things don't matter anymore because she just kind of, as kindly as she did it and as compassionately as she did it, she just basically closed a door that I was really hoping to go through, and I don't have a choice anymore. And that was just, couldn't deal with it. Could not wrap my head around it. Which is crazy how eventually when it was time to do IVF, I was like, whatever, let's just do what we got to do.
Well, and as you mentioned in the book, you know, that IVF is just one of many things that didn't go the way you thought it would. So it's not like that was the first time like you thought you would be, you know, a younger mom.
Yeah, it wasn't just the first hurdle by any means. You had already run a marathon at that point.
Yeah, it was like, you know, I really thought I'd be pregnant in my 20s and I really thought I'd be this age mom. And everybody kept telling me you're so young. And it's so crazy how swiftly it goes from you're so young to advanced maternal.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's like a shift that you don't see coming. You're so young. Don't worry. It's fine.
Aging is super accelerated in fertility. Like you are like elderly, super quick in fertility.
Yes. And it was just like one thing after the other. It was like trying to find the right doctor, then trying to find how to get to that doctor. And then, oh, my job changed insurance. And so I can't go to this doctor anymore. And let me start with this person. And it felt like you're starting over every day, all the time. And in the meantime, go to work, smile, be nice, take care of other people's kids. And that's one of the groups that I have the most compassionate for that reach out to me on the blog are teachers and other people that work with kids, because it is a unique set of circumstances to be in this fight and having to defend your ability to properly instruct young people. I was a school librarian first. You have parent-teacher conference, and the first time you mention a child's behavior or something that you feel will be a great resource for them, and the parent goes, right, so do you have kids? And it's like, well, no, but I got this whole master's degree over here. Is that cool? I mean, I was a kid. Does that count? And the same with libraries. It would be, you know, you have kids in there and you're trying to recommend books and they're like, well, what books do you read to your kids? Because this seems too advanced and I'm like, yeah, but seeing as I'm the person that ordered the book, I'm the person that reviewed the book, I think I could tell you what works, considering I've been in this profession for a while and I see kids every day. Those little tiny affronts that are happening every day, or the kids themselves that are like, you don't want no kids? Can I call you mom?
Yeah.
Like those kind of things, it just starts to wear on you. there's just nobody to talk to about that because you're like, really? I'm just going to go home.
Infertility is not just something you think about at night on your own time. Like, it's something that there are these little, triggers kind of all throughout the day.
You don't know where it's coming from. You think, well, I'm just going to the grocery store. It's going to be fine. And then you get...
meanwhile, there's 5 pregnant people in there.
Yes. Every single pregnant person on earth is in your line that day. It's like, okay, you go shopping or whatever, and it's like, oh, so all of the parking spaces at the front is either handicap or expectant parent parking. Cool. Okay, so where do I fit? Oh, I got to park way down. It just feels like everything that you thought was safe.
I laugh because it's just so true.
It just comes out of nowhere. The things that you don't even expect are going to be an issue are an issue. And you're like, really? This is what we doing? The movie theater? This is what y'all doing today? The zoo? This is what we're doing?
This is a rated R movie. Why is there a child in this rated R movie?
Jabari and I really we try to take advantage of Chicago as tourists, even though lived here whole life. And so every now and again, we'll be like, let's do something the tourists would do. Let's go to the zoo or whatever. And when we go, you're thinking it's like 2:00 in the afternoon. The rest of the people should be newborns everywhere, pregnant people everywhere. And I'm like, why do you even want to walk this zoo? Go sit down. Why are you here? I came here to get away from you.
Don't you need to take a nap?
Yeah. I'd be at work and this was a hard one for me where I had to really push my compassion level because we'd have the mom group that would come for story times, and I would have to sit there and listen to their after story time mom talk, and it just would really destroy me.
Complain about the things that you would give anything to be going through.
Oh my gosh. Or one who she unexpectedly was pregnant with twins and she was distraught. And I was trying to have compassion for the fact that she probably had different ideas for her life. And I am not going to be upset that she is actively sitting 2 feet in front of me talking about how frustrated it is to just surprise, here's 2 whole babies for free. Do you understand that there's people in my life that would give anything? But I had to really muster up let me look at things through your lens and see where this may be uncomfortable for you physically. And also you may have had goals and dreams for yourself that these are stalling. And I'm going to go to the bathroom and cry and then I'll be back. I just had to do that a lot. But now I know how to tell other people how to do that too.
Well, when I was going through my infertility group back when I was a patient, one of the other people, she was struggling with adoption and the ups and downs of that process. And her personal thing was, well, Angelina Jolie just adopted another kid. Well, I'm still waiting for my paperwork. So it's like, it's very hard to not be looking at other situations and to not take it so personally because you're doing everything that you can. You're doing everything right. And there's still things that are outside of your control where you're just not getting the outcome that you were wanting.
It gives you a little bit of PTSD. I'm grateful for the blog because it made me take note of these things and really look at it as a case study almost. There's that librarian brain again. But looking at it as, okay, these are some things that I noticed in me, and these are some things that I noticed in a lot of other people that I talked to. And that trauma kept coming up. And I had not heard of infertility discussed as a trauma. I had only heard it well, it's a medical condition and it's not something that you have to do. There's nothing that says you have to have kids. So what's the big deal? And I think people really couldn't connect to the idea that there is a certain vision for your life that when that doesn't go that way, that is traumatic for you because it changes how you walk through life. That's what trauma does.
Yeah, there's still this kind of thought out there that fertility treatment is somehow an elective kind of thing.
Optional.
It's optional. Your reproductive organs, they're not organs like any other part of your body. Don't worry about it, kind of.
Or, if it's meant to be, it'll be. Or, bringing in religion to it. Do you go back and read your old blog posts? Do you put yourself back? What is that like for you? Do you still feel those same emotions? Or do you just kind of feel like, oh, I wish I could tell you the things I feel now?
Sometimes when I go back, it's the same emotion. Or I feel sorry for her. I feel really sad for her. And I wish she had more support at the time. And I wish that she was able to rest because so much of the beginnings of my marriage were spent stressing about that and stressing about money and stressing about how will we get this and how will we get to this next level? Because when we get to this level, then we can do this. And if we can't do this, then how will we ever have kids? And if we don't, all of that was just constant rotation. And I look back now and I think, oh, that was important, but also it would have been nice to just kind of relax sometimes. But it was that trauma as it built up, it made my anxiety unbearable. I would go out of town for work and I would be terrified to fly. I would be terrified to drive because I would be like, I'm going to die before I have kids. Like it would be that dramatic of a fear of, since nothing is working in this area, it must mean I don't matter. I don't belong here. And I'm not meant to be here or leave any kind of legacy behind. So if I don't do 100% at work, if I don't do 100% with my sorority, if I don't do 100% at church, if I don't do 100%, 150% with my family and my nieces and all the other kids in my life, and all of that weight was on me. And when I read those, I can feel that again. I feel that same level of just urgency and panic of this is never going to work. And nobody cares that this isn't working. And so I don't matter. What I want doesn't matter. All of the things that I have accomplished professionally don't matter. It's like getting straight A's, you feel like, and it's watching somebody else walk away with the honors cords. That's how it felt, was like, I did everything that they told me to do. I did literally everything that they said to be the good Black girl. And this is not getting me what I was expecting or was told would come. Somebody lied and somebody gonna have to give me a refund or I'm gonna flip some tables in here. It went really from that just sad to I will flip every table in this place. Somebody does not answer for this. And when I go back and read it, that same feeling of, wow, I can't believe you did all of that, because you block some of it out after a while. But when I go back, I'm like, dang, that was a lot, girl.
Yeah, and it comes through in your book too, because I remember, and I think I say it in our review of it, is like I was feeling all those things like going through. It's like, okay, now I'm mad, and oh, now I'm like so much sorrow, and then like, oh, hope again, and it's like you have such a way with words, and it's probably because you're a librarian too, because amazing librarians are great. So yeah, it really comes through, and I think it's so helpful for people to hear somebody else explain, like, no, these are real feelings and you are really feeling this and you're not alone. What you're saying is valid and you get to have these feelings. That's okay.
Yep. You're allowed to be as pissed as you are.
And especially, being open about the situation as a Black woman. Yeah. We did a recent podcast with Dr. Jasmine Johnson on racial disparities, and she was talking about the stats for maternal mortality. And just like what you were saying, that, you can look at someone that has everything right on paper, college educated, high, and you still have these rates of complications that are worse than a white woman that didn't finish high school. It's not just a matter of blaming people and saying, oh, well, there are these disparities in care because of choices. That no, there are so many societal factors that are keeping people from having quality care.
I think that's part of what fueled the anger and what led it to, from a blog to a nonprofit, was looking at how many times I sat in those emergency rooms or the neighborhood clinics and just really, nobody really cared who I was. They didn't care that I had been sitting there all day. They didn't care that I was literally telling them, okay, so I've been bleeding for 2 months and I just kind of want to not do that. Could you help a little bit?
Not to bother you.
Just if you've got time, I'd really like just to not pass clots.
And you probably feel like you need to bring around your framed master's degree to be like, I'm an educated person.
It was craziness. And it just made me so frustrated because here I was and I did know, but I thought about all the others who were in there who didn't. There was one time that I went and I sat with one of my friends, because one of the things that came of this was we would sit in the emergency rooms and waiting rooms with each other. The more that I would find that my friends were dealing with these things too, we would just sit together and just be there all day and just sit in the waiting rooms or whatever. And I remember one time we went to one of the local hospitals for her to get some ultrasounds done. And we were sitting in this room and I took pictures. They're not the greatest pictures, but we were sitting in this room and there was nobody at the reception desk. It was dingy looking. The poster holders were kind of falling off the wall. There was nothing that, and then it was like a big bulletin board that somebody had taken the time to decorate about breast cancer. And it was all these women sitting in here waiting for someone to do ultrasounds. There was one girl that was wheeled in and just left on the gurney. And she just pulled the sheet over her head because she was embarrassed because there was nobody even talking to her. And there was a lady sitting next to us who I remember was at least in her 40s, and she was on the phone and she was like, yeah, they told me to come in here. They said I might have fibroids, but I don't know what fibroids are. And they just set me in this room. And I can remember just all of the different ages of women in that room. And I remember telling the women, because I had at that point had the broken brown egg, like, you need to tell them this and you need to ask this and this, that, and the other. But just if I hadn't been there, here were these women of various ages who were asking for help in the most desperate of ways. And there was literally nobody even at the desk.
Yeah, what the picture? There's like nobody. It's just like desolate.
It looked like when Rick woke up on The Walking Dead. It was just nobody in that space to even say, don't worry, somebody will be out in a second. And there were times where if I didn't want that kind of treatment, because that particular hospital I had sat at so long once that Jabari left, went to get dinner, came back. My mom and I had been sitting there, and I just finally was like, let's just go because nobody cares. It's 10 o'clock. We've been here all day. Let's just go. But that particular hospital and the other county hospitals, if I didn't want to sit there and get free treatment, which I guess is probably part of why they treat you that way, because they're like, well, it's free. I would have to make the decision, well, I'm going to go over to this other hospital in the suburbs where I know they're going to give me a bill, but I'll deal with that when the bill comes. Because at least today, maybe they'll say, yeah, let's do an ultrasound, or yeah, here's a referral, or here's what's happening to you. Sometimes I just wanted that. I just wanted somebody to say, here's what's happening, or who would call me back. Because there were other places that we would go. They would start on something and then no phone call back to say, this is what happened, or these are the results, or here's an appointment, until I called them to say, hey, so I was in there 3 weeks ago for this bleeding thing. Guess what? It's back. Any word on that?
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh yeah, we made an ultrasound appointment for you, but you didn't show. You didn't tell me I had an appointment. You didn't call me. You didn't send anything. And so the frustrating part was that in my community, where there were these women who were being told that they were hyperfertile and that they had no problem, they were dealing with all of these issues, but they weren't having a match of the care because the facilities in our area weren't even up to par or even understood what we were dealing with. And some were closing. Some nearby, they had closed their entire maternity wards. Some had closed their entire gynecology departments. And meanwhile, here's these women in the emergency rooms waiting for someone to tell them why they're dealing with clotting or pain that they can't work through. Like all of these kind of things just fueled the need for it to become a nonprofit and for me to be able to, expand it from just here's this frustration about infertility to here's the frustration about infertility, but also why aren't there more Black embryologists? Why aren't there more Black reproductive endocrinologists? Why aren't there more Black nurses? Why aren't there? Okay, so here's this, but also, did you know this was our history? Did you know that culturally this was the thing? Did you know? Because they were connected and nobody was connecting them.
You mentioned in the book at one point that you went to ASRM, was it 2021 or 2020?
Mm-hmm. Last year, yeah.
And it was where was it at?
It was in Baltimore.
It's on page 110.
Yeah, I know we have flags for it. But yeah, I was just struck because you're like, there was no mention of the history of the actual place where this conference is being held right now.
Yeah, the biggest congress of reproductive health in the country, and the we couldn't have taken some flowers to Henrietta Lacks's block. We couldn't have released some balloons and said thank you for your cells that helped us create the very technology that we're now making millions of dollars on. Like just that in and of itself, or just acknowledging here we are in the birthplace of, that could have been fine if that was just in the brochure. But it was just me knowing to tell my mom and aunt, since we were there, we need to drive over and see where this woman was from. And in driving there, I saw how far she had to go to come to Johns Hopkins. at a time where it wasn't even safe for her to travel that far.
Oh, wow. That is, yeah, if you're actually seeing the distance and being there, like it's so,
The
wow.
distance.
Yeah, I can just imagine what that was like.
And on public transportation or, having to wait for somebody to be able to drive her. Whereas we're in the car with air conditioning and GPS, like those kind of things click to me because I just think in story. And so when I think about her life, I think of it in that story and just how she had to muster up the energy to leave her kids at home, travel all the way to the hospital, then go back home because at the time, the treatment that they were giving her, she wasn't staying in the hospital. They were giving her something and then sending her home. There were suppositories that were just not healthy to use, which of course, medicine improves over the years. But just when you think about the context, it becomes even more heartbreaking. And the more that I was reading about the history, I was like, I can't be in Baltimore and not go see where she was from. I can't not acknowledge that this very area is where Black people would all the time be afraid that their bodies would be used for experimentation. And I can remember when I was 18 or so and I got my license and I signed up to be an organ donor. And I can remember elders in my family being like, you shouldn't put that on there. And I was like, but what? People need organs. And they was like, don't put that on there because if you go to the county hospital, even if they could have helped you, they won't help you because you put organ donor and they'll be able to use your body. And I was like, y'all being paranoid. And then years later to read about it and go, oh no, they're not being paranoid. These are Black people who came to Chicago from the Great Migration, who lived in the states where these things were commonplace, and their actual fear sounded like superstition to me because I didn't know the context.
But it happened.
Yeah, I didn't know the context. And so now what I try to do is provide that context while also being like, yeah, but also this shit is bogus anyway. And let's talk about that. And also, I'm a little bit pissed. And also, there might be vodka in my tea. Don't worry about it. Like those kind of things just work all in conjunction for me because that's just how my brain works. But yeah, ASRM was my mind blowing.
Well, you have to at least acknowledge these things. Like we're in Seattle, and so at the start of like sporting events and academic conferences, they do the land acknowledgement.
The land acknowledgements, yeah.
And it's amazing how some people get so upset. Like, why are they? It's like no one's saying this fixes it, right? But you're at least acknowledging the reality of the situation and where the land came from. So
boggles my mind. I used to get people that were very upset about it. It wasn't like a lot of people, but I would get people that would say, well, why do you have to have the broken brown egg? That's creating more division in something that we're already struggling to get. And I was like,
well, because the white eggs don't have as many problems getting the care that they need.
Yeah, it has to have a designation because there's a designation. It doesn't mean that the pain of infertility is different. It means that mine comes with additional layers that I also want to see addressed. Because if I'm represented, I don't feel so alone. And then I can work with you. Until then, I don't feel like I'm apart. And so I'm going to sit back and just watch. But once I feel like, well, my part is acknowledged, your part is acknowledged. Okay, so now what can we do together? What can we fix together? But when you mention things, and that's just the culture of our society, right? If you bring up racism, people who aren't racist feel like they have to rush and say, but I'm not. I didn't say you were. Hit dogs holler. You didn't have to say anything. All you had to do was say, you know what, I agree. And we would have been fine. Or you can, silence is free. You could have also did that. It would have cost you nothing.
That goes really well for if you have a question about somebody's, like if they're going to have kids, or you're questioning their, like what their family plan is, just, you don't have to ask.
Just zip it. Keep those words. You might need them one day. Just shut it down.
Yeah.
You're going to need that breath one day. It's free. Minding your business is free. With the way that the economy is, you need as many free things as you can find. Minding your business is free. Shutting up is free. Going to do something for someone else that is helpful rather than harmful is also free. Reading a book, free.
Big on books.
Getting educated about these things, free. There's so many free things that people can do, and they choose violence anyway every day. And if that's why in the book I say, if you get cussed out, that's on you. You chose to ask the wrong person
Right.
the wrong question.
The wrong questions on the wrong day when that person is not here for it.
On the wrong day. And now your feelings are in shambles, and that is on you. And now hopefully you've learned.
You have some really good responses for different situations in there too. I'm like, yep, that's good. You have those in your back pocket. Sometimes they can be useful. And maybe that person will think before they ask a question that they might not have realized was very insensitive or flat out offensive before that.
Not everyone that's listening has read your book, but hopefully they'll read your book afterwards. But
I hope so.
Once you did decide to do IVF, like, how was it for you? I mean, were the things that you were worried about? I mean, obviously the financial hurdles, that's a whole chapter in the book, but the actual like experience in doing the injections, like, how did you get through it? Was it as bad as you were thinking, or was it actually not quite as terrible?
You know what? At that point, I think I was so tired that it was just like, you know what? Whatever needs to be done, let's do it. Because in the middle of that, we had also pursued adoption, and then that fell through. And then we were foster parents for 6 or 7 months. And then that was a whole tumultuous experience in and of itself. And so by the time we got to IVF, after we tried to get a doctor, and then our insurance changed and we had to change doctors. And then we finally got to testing of both of us and realized that we had more issues than we knew. Yeah. I think when we finally got the go, and the actual medication showed up and the actual dates came.
Your big $3,000 box of medication showed up.
Yes. It was like, okay, I really don't care what we need to do. Okay, we're watching Parks and Recreation.
Oh, and of course she has triplets at the end, which is so unrealistic.
I'm going to have a Kit Kat that sits here that I can have after. I'm going to have this on the side, and then we're just going to chill out. And then I was cool. As long as he didn't count it down and say when the shot was coming, if I could just focus on something I was watching on my iPad, be it Bob's Burgers, Steven Universe, or Parks and Rec, I was good, because that would keep my attention, and I would just kind of remind myself, we're here now. This is what it is. And we got to just deal with it. And then I ended up with gestational diabetes. So I had shots just all over the place.
Oh, gosh. You thought you were past it.
So my fear of needles is gone. Gone.
I tell patients a lot. I'm like, especially when we're talking about like egg freezing patients and stuff. And that one of the number one worries is the injections. I'm like, listen, you're not going to believe me right now, but you will be okay. And it's kind of like immersion therapy for better or for worse, but you will, like, you'll see me on day 6 of your cycle and you will be like, I got this. You know, you might not like it, but you'll be fine.
Do a shot in the bathroom at work, no problem.
Yeah.
Whatever. You know, dip to the car, it's fine. You don't even think about it anymore. It's when I go now for just regular doctor's appointments and they're like, which arm? I'm like, I don't pincushion. I don't care. Do what you got to do. I don't really.
Some of our patients laugh about that when they go in to finally then pregnancy in their OB. They were all like, I'm going to do a vaginal ultrasound. And they're like, oh, please. I've had so many.
I could do it myself if you need. Just let me know. Do you need any help?
I'm not quite flexible enough to get that left ovary, but
yeah.
But yeah, by the time I was in it at that point. Once he got comfortable, because Brian was more nervous than me, really, once we got the medications, because he was like, I'm not a nurse and I don't know what I'm doing. But I had been entrenched in it so long that I was like, here's a YouTube video and here's this and here's that, and we'll be fine and figure it out. And because at that point, you know, a lot of times all of the medical stuff has been focused on the carrying partner. And so it's like, okay, now's your turn. So I really don't have time or patience for your squeamish or whatever. You're going to have to just suck it up, sir, because we got stuff to do. We got stuff to do. Yeah. And it was fine after that. I was like, okay, we're in it now. And I was determined. I was so tired and determined that I was like, I will flip every table up it. I will flip every table in here.
Well, Anne, you've mentioned before that you would poke yourself in the eyeball with a needle if it meant that I could get to the end game.
Exactly. I'm like, by that point, it's like, whatever you want me to do. So.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
And I do think, I mean, when you mentioned gestational diabetes too, like it's, you have part of that letting go of the control that you have to go through with infertility. It does set you up for parenting
Yes.
because all kinds of things are going to keep happening that are not what was part of your plan, even if you're doing quote unquote everything right.
In the delivery room, I had just kind of been there for a few days because they induced me at 38 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Wow, it's like you have a checkbox of every complication.
Yeah, of everything that could happen. And I had been sitting there 3 days and it only had just started ramping up and my water broke. And I was like, okay, well, I guess, yeah, this is an epidural time. Let's do that. And as soon as I got the epidural, they were like, well, actually, baby's heart is dropping a little bit. We think we're going to do a C-section before it becomes an emergency. And I was like, okay. And I remember like the residents and stuff, they kept talking. All of a sudden, there was all these people in the room. And it was the first time that my mom and Jabari had actually went downstairs to get something to eat. And I was like, as soon as I'm in here by myself, here's all of these people. My mom was like, what is happening? But they kept coming to the bed and going, you're doing so well. You're so calm. And I was like, do you have any idea what it has taken to get to this point? I really do not care. Where are we going? Over here? Do you need me to walk? Or are you moving the bed? Or you need me to carry something?
Just get us both out of this safely, please.
Yeah. Can we just get this done? Because and they were just like, she is really calm. And I was like, yeah, that's called trauma.
Yeah.
I don't get phased at this. People would ask me like, are you nervous or whatever? And I'd be like, well, he got to get out of there some kind of way. So no, not really. At that point, I was just numb to the fact that you're just not going to have control over any of this, any of these things that you thought you were going to run. False. All of that is false. And he now proves it every day. Everything that I say is a why. Everything that I tell him to do is a, why do I need to do that? Or he says things and I go, you know what? Can't control anything. And that is a reminder that you are just going to keep giving me, sir. Okay, cool.
Well, and for mine too, like I look and I think about, not as much now, but especially when she was younger, it's like the child that I would have had if things went the way I thought it was in my plan. I'd be like this older, completely different. It's like, I wouldn't want any of that. It's like, I want you. And so it's like, once you're on that other side, all of a sudden it is, I mean, it's so cliche to say, but it's so true. Like it is worth it. And you do kind of feel like, all right, however this child came into my life, whether it was fertility treatment or if you did adopt or if you had some other situation, like you kind of feel like, okay, now I do get it and I wouldn't trade this for a different scenario, even though what I thought I wanted is very different than what ended up happening.
40-year-old me has much more patience for Judah than 24-year-old me would have had. My knees are not as good, but my patience and my years of working with young people have influenced how I am with him. And so those kind of things, I do really try to look at and say, okay, things worked the way they were supposed to work. But it's like when you're in it, if somebody says that to you, you could tackle them.
I know.
But now I think that, and I be like, yeah, this me is much better for that kid, because he and I, my goodness, younger me and that kid, we would have argued even more than we do now. But now we're cool.
Well, the therapist that led my infertility support group, I can't do justice, but she had this nice guided meditation about you're on one side of the river and like you're going to get to that other side of the river and you just don't know exactly what bridge is going to get you there. And like eventually you are going to be there and you're going to look back at yourself and you're going to just kind of feel like I did it. But it's hard because you don't know, are you taking a boat? Are you building this bridge? Like, and you don't know how you're going to get there. But the way you're feeling right now is not the way you're going to feel the rest of your life. Like you are going to find a resolution somehow and it's going to be okay.
It's hard to keep that in mind, but it is such a good one that you'll get there. Yeah.
If you have a 23-year-old lady that is just getting into this process, what kind of advice are you going to give to that person who is now
your younger self?
Younger self, yes.
I think the biggest one is the one I say everywhere I go, which is infertility is bigger than babies. Whatever it is that is this little thing that you're thinking that's not important. If I just get to the baby, that won't matter. Deal with that thing too, because this is bigger than babies. And if it's affecting how you see yourself, if it's affecting how you are in your relationships, if it's affecting your mental health in general, that's worthy of attention because you're enough already. Anything that happens beyond this is an addition to. So at the base level, you should be paying attention to that. And I would have loved to know that then, that this is bigger than babies. This is, this is your heart health. This is your mental health. This is your financial health. This is your relationships health. And having somebody to validate that, and not in a placating and patronizing way of, you're young, it's fine, there's other things to focus on, but a genuine, this is bigger than that. This will be enriched by how much you pay attention to you right now. This can work. We can find you the help for this. We'll work through this. But this matters too. Did you eat today? Did you sleep? Did you go to bed at an actual time? Or were you up researching all of this over and over again? In your journal, did you write what you were grateful for? Or do you wake up feeling this sense of lack that says, I don't have, and I won't have, and I didn't get, and I didn't do? Are you nurturing and parenting you? Because you need to work on parenting you so that you can parent somebody else. And everything that you do for you is a way of parenting your future children, because you're making good decisions for them. You're making good decisions about yourself, the people you are involved with, the things that you're doing with your time. All of those things are parenting decisions. So you're already a parent. So don't focus so much on getting to the parent. Focus on everything that you feel about yourself, because that's going to influence how you parent and how you work with whatever young person comes your way. They could be a 14-year-old foster child, and you still want them to get the best you, because that's who you were supposed to be.
Oh, mic drop.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
I was like, I got nothing.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us
Of course.
today.
Thanks for having me. I was so honored. I was just like searching my book, and I was like, oh, somebody reviewed my book. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of the Whole Pineapple Podcast. We hope it was helpful.
If you know someone who could benefit from hearing the podcast, we hope you'll share it with them.
And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review The Whole Pineapple on your favorite podcast app. Every rating and review makes us easier to find.
This podcast is sponsored by Seattle Reproductive Medicine and is produced by Audiotocracy Podcast Production. We'll see you next time. Have a delicious week.